Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our Project Connect Urban Rail online open house. It is now 12 o'clock. We're going to wait just a minute or two before getting this thing going so that we can allow a few other folks to log in. So if you could just sit tight and give us a minute or two, we'll get going shortly. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all again very much for joining us for our online open house for Project Connect Urban Rail. The way that we're going to handle this today is we're going to go through a pretty quick presentation, maybe 15 minutes or so. And if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to type them in the question box and we will try to get to them. We may also stop on occasion as we get through this and ask you a few questions. And there'll be some polls that we'll like to take of you that are attending. But what we'll try to do is save quite a bit of time at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can from those of you who have interest in this project. So with that, I'll introduce myself. My name is John Michael Cortez. I'm with Capital Metro, and I'm on the Project Connect team. And I'm joined here in the Project Connect office by Scott Gross, who's our deputy lead for the Urban Rail program. Say hi, Scott. Howdy. And joining us shortly will be Kyle Cahey, who is our Urban Rail program lead for Project Connect. And so I'll go ahead and get going. And again, hopefully you can all see what's on the screen and also hear us. So Project Connect Urban Rail is one piece of the overall Project Connect plan. And Project Connect, for those of you who are not aware, and I imagine most of you all are by now, it represents a couple of things. First and foremost, Project Connect is a partnership. It's a partnership among Central Texas transportation agencies and municipalities and lots of different local governments and stakeholder groups to create and implement a vision for high-capacity transit serving Central Texas. So these agencies came together to address these regional challenges that we all face. In addition, Project Connect is a vision and a plan for that high-capacity transit system serving our region. And we came together as Project Connect really to address several regional challenges that many of you have heard before, connecting all of our growing activity centers throughout the region together as best as we can, connecting many of our growing areas, our activity centers, to the core of our region, which is the area around downtown Austin, because downtown Austin remains the economic, cultural, and civic hub of our region, so we need to connect Central Texas to that hub. We also needed to develop a plan and a vision that recognized that we have some constraints. We have physical constraints here in Central Texas. We also have fiscal constraints here in Central Texas. So we had to come up with a plan that was affordable and realistic and use the space and right-of-ways that we have today more effectively and more efficiently. We also had to develop a system that could accommodate the tremendous growth that we're facing today here in our region and that we know we will have in the future. But the largest challenge, or perhaps the most critical challenge that Project Connect, the partners came together to address, is congestion. We are a very congested place. We are among the most congested metro areas in North America. And I think most of you who have the need to travel throughout Central Texas, especially at rush hour, understand that we are very congested and getting worse nearly every day because of our growth. This congestion really is starting to impact our quality of life, our economy, and our environment certainly, and is a big challenge that we need to address throughout the region. With regard to quality of life, the average that's estimated here is that 42 hours per person a year in this last year were wasted stuck in traffic, 6.2 million hours lost collectively. So this is a pretty big deal. So congestion is the problem. And what we've done, let me pause that real quick, is the partners came together to develop this vision, a vision for a Central Texas regional high-capacity transit system that addressed those challenges that I started with, connecting activity centers together, connecting them to the core of our region as best as they can, providing real alternatives to congestion, real alternatives, and that's important. We'll talk about that a lot today, that recognized our physical and our fiscal constraints, and that could grow along with Central Texas. So this is the map of the vision that was created, over a year and a half ago, I think by this time, and that hopefully many of you have seen out there in the community. Now what we've been doing is trying to turn this vision into a reality. But before I get into that, I wanted to play a quick video which a few of you probably have seen before. You know, it's one thing to look at a map, which is great. I enjoy looking at them. But it's another thing to really talk about how people will actually use this system to meet their daily needs. And so we developed this quick video, which I'd like you to take a look at now, that kind of runs you through how people might use this system.
Oh, look, it's Central Texas, where folks move to their own beat as they work, play, shop, learn, or just catch up with great friends. But with more than 100 new people here every day, it's not always an easy place to get around. And as traffic gets worse, it's getting in your way. Our mobility problem is keeping people like you from connecting with all those great things and great friends who make this such a great place to live. That's why regional transportation agencies and other partners are working together on Project Connect, our region's vision for connecting Central Texans with high-quality, reliable transportation choices. Let's take a glimpse into that not-so-distant future, shall we? Meet Lee from Leander. He's a lab tech who doesn't have the time to ride his bike all the way to work at the new medical school, so he bikes to the nearest metro rail station to get downtown on the Red Line. Once there, he's ready to roll. Meet Rosa from Rosedale. She can't wait to see the new romantic comedy, and she's just made last-minute plans with her good friend Beth. With one click on a smartphone, she has access to real-time scheduling and online payment, so she's good to go on Metro Rapid and arrives just before the coming attractions. Meet Ron, Rhonda, and Little Ronnie from Round Rock. Their friends in San Antonio have invited the family down for a Spurs game, so they hop onto the L-Star Regional Rail and avoid the I-35 traffic and frustration, all while catching up on the stats before the big game. Meet Trent and Tracy from Travis Heights. They share a car and use the money they save to fix up their lovely 1950s bungalow. So when Tracy takes the car to Fredericksburg, Trent catches Urban Rail into downtown to meet up with friends at happy hour. Meet Rita from the Riata. She found a great apartment with her friends, but it's a little far from campus. No big deal. She can study for the next class on a bus using the Mopac Express lanes as she zooms through traffic. Of course, there are lots of other chapters to our transit story. There's Andre, and Bobby, and Caroline, and, of course, there's you. People who came together to help develop the Project Connect vision map of a regional network of transportation choices, all connecting to each other and to the best Central Texas has to offer. That's why the Project Connect team needs you and your support. Connect to the vision now. Visit us at connectcentraltexas.com.
Like I said, that video just briefly describes how we think people will be able to use this system, and that is the most important word, system, in the future. I think the most important takeaway from today, if you remember nothing else that is said today, this would be the thing, and that's no one rail line, no one bus route is really going to address all of the region's needs. We need to develop a system. And so this is the goal, the system you see before us. This is the vision here. We use every kind of high-capacity transit tool in the toolbox nearly to address the very diverse and growing transportation needs here in Central Texas. In this vision, the good thing about it is realistic. There are pieces in place now. There are pieces under construction. And what we'll be talking about today is our efforts to advance the next pieces that we want to add to this system to realize this vision for Central Texas. In place today, we have the Metro Rail Red Line, which operates from Leander to downtown Austin, operating very successfully. It's standing room only in the morning and afternoon rush hours. We're pretty much out of capacity, and fortunately, we've just been awarded, Capital Metro has, a significant grant from the Federal Transit Administration to increase capacity on that line. We also, in January, introduced our first Metro Rapid line from North Lamar through the University, Capitol, and downtown area, down South Congress, all the way to Slaughter Lane. And under construction, we have the second Metro Rapid line starting at the Domain, operating down Burnett Road, also through the University, Capitol, and downtown area, and then down South Lamar to Westgate. That will be in service within the next few months. Also under construction are the Mopac Express lanes here on North Mopac, which we hope are open around the 2016 timeframe, and in which Capital Metro will be operating very reliable express transit with reliable service and fast service in those lanes. So you can see we're starting to make the lines in this regional vision come to reality. But the big deal, though, is what is the next step after this? We have these projects under construction. What are the next steps? How do you turn these conceptual lines into reality? And the way that you do that is you break off chunks of this vision. Imagine that vision is kind of like a sketch of the plan, what you think you need. You then need to break off chunks of it and really do some more detailed study to identify what are the actual projects that you want to advance in those areas. And we looked at all of the regional travel corridors radiating from the core of the region, the area around downtown Austin. And we used a lot of data to prioritize them, and they're all in need of some additional transit capacity and high-capacity transit at some point. But in prioritizing these, the two that really jumped out as being the ones we need to address immediately were the North Corridor and the Central Corridor. So the North Corridor runs from Georgetown to downtown Austin, and the Project Connect partners recently completed a couple of years of study working with stakeholders in those areas to determine what are the high-capacity transit projects that we want to advance there. And you can get all that information on the North Corridor plan on the Project Connect website. But what we're here to talk about today is the Central Corridor. Just that area in and around Central Austin we identified as the next highest priority. And there's lots of different reasons why high-capacity transit in the Central Corridor is critical to realizing the overall Project Connect vision. One, just within that Central Corridor, there are an awful lot of travel activity just starting and ending in the Central Corridor. I think the data that we're looking at has indicated that every day there's about 46,000 work trips just within the Central Corridor. That means somebody who may live within the Central Corridor also works within the Central Corridor and is trying to get around the Central Corridor. So just within that area, there's an awful lot of congestion and need to get around. But also, an additional high-capacity transit investment in the Central Corridor is also important because it needs to connect to the entire regional high-capacity transit system. So as we get folks in from the North Corridor or parts of the southern parts of the region, or from Elgin and Bastrop, or the western parts of our region, once they get into the central corridor, they still need to be able to get around. So we need something that connects to the projects that will be coming in from parts outside of Austin, or from the or further out parts of Austin, because once people get into central Austin, they still need to get around to their final destination. So we need an investment in the central corridor that also helps with some last mile connections, is that challenge that we call it. And then also we need something in the central corridor that will tie the regional system together, so that people can use Metro Rail and have something to connect them to Lone Star Rail, or using the express lane, a way that from there they can connect to Metro Rapid. So we need something that also ties the entire system here in the central corridor together. And our regional vision had conceptually proposed an urban rail system serving most of Austin that connected up to all the other regional pieces of the system. So that's the Project Connect vision. So I want to stop there and just ask a quick couple of questions, if I could. Let's see. First question I'd like to ask is, and you should see a poll pop up on your screen. So the question is, do you believe that the Project Connect partners are moving in the right direction with addressing our regional transit needs? So if you have a second there, please click on the poll. If you strongly agree with that statement, please click strongly agree. If you strongly disagree, click that option, or if you're not sure, select neutral, or anywhere in between. So let's just take a few more seconds as you answer that. I think we've got 25 attendees on the line today, and thus far we've got about 3/4 of you who have voted. So just take one more second there to vote, and then I'll share the results here in just a second. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to vote, so let's see what you said. Well, it looks like most of you agree, or strongly agree, that we're moving in the right direction, which is great. There are a few of you who disagree or strongly disagree, and at least one or two of you who are neutral. And that's good that we have at least a majority of you agreeing that we're headed in the right direction. Another quick question I'd like to ask with regard to what I just described of the need to invest in the central corridor. I'd like to ask, high capacity transit in the central corridor is critical to realizing the Project Connect regional vision. How much do you agree with that statement? Do you strongly agree? Do you strongly disagree? Or neutral? Do you think that an investment in high-capacity transit in the central corridor is important for the entire regional vision to be successful? So please just take another second or two to answer that one. Good. Well, hopefully everybody's had a chance to answer that one. Let me close that so I can share the results with you. So it looks like everybody on the line agrees that some sort of investment in high-capacity transit in the central corridor is critical to realizing the entire regional vision. We're glad you agree with that. So again, we prioritize the north and central corridor, and now we're going to focus in on the central corridor. So we launched the central corridor study, gosh, well over a year ago. And really, the Central Corridor study was about answering two very important questions. In the first phase, we were asking, where are we going next? Where within the Central Corridor does that next high-capacity transit investment need to be? There's a lot of different places that we could put it, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about where they think that next investment ought to go, but we had to make that decision first. Once we had made that decision, the next question is, how will we get there? What is the actual project? What kind of transit does it need to be? Which routes does it need to take? Where do the stations need to be? What kind of service needs to be provided? And this is important. Going back to the regional vision, again, the concept was an urban rail system serving central Austin and other parts of Austin that operated on certain corridors. But again, that was just our vision. We had to take a much closer study of, is urban rail the right kind of transit? Are the corridors that we identified the right corridors? So we had to define a project in the second phase, and we're just wrapping that up. And there's a lot of other process behind all that, but I really want to jump into the heart of the matter, which is the result of all this process. But first, how did we answer that first question? So let's, the phase one recommendation here. So to answer that first question of where do we go next in the Central Corridor, we had to prioritize which area. So we took as an assumption that we needed to connect three very important areas together. That's downtown, the Central Business District area, the Capitol Complex, and the University of Texas campus. So that was the baseline. We need to connect those three things together with some sort of high-capacity transit investment. But the question is, where do we go from there? And so what we did was we, using traffic data and other data, broke up the Central Corridor into 10 what we called sub-corridors, 10 travel sheds within the Central Corridor leading into the core. And then what we went through was a process using data and public input to determine which of those should be the next investment. Not the last investment, but the next investment. So we went through a pretty rigorous process, and at the end of that process, we identified that the East Riverside Corridor was the highest priority for coming out of the core for the next investment in high-capacity transit. In addition, we identified the Highland Corridor, so north from the University of Texas campus, and then essentially paralleling IH-35, terminating around the 290 area near the Highland redevelopment that ACC has taken on as the next priority subcorridor. And again, there was a lot of factors that went into that decision. Lots of different data. No one piece of data told the whole story. But if you wanted to focus on one that was really the differentiator, especially with the Highland corridor, it would have to go back to congestion. Highland corridor encompasses IH-35, which is the most congested section of the most congested corridor, not only in Central Texas and Austin, but of the entire state of Texas. It currently sits at the top of the list of all the roads that are congested in Texas. And so having projects in these two corridors would allow us to achieve a real alternative to congestion in the worst corridor in our region. And so again, there were lots of other factors, growth, employment, demographics, etc., existing transit ridership, but really congestion was a major factor in making these corridors a reality, because again, one of our primary goals is to provide that alternative to congestion. So at the end of this decision-making process in phase one, we knew we needed a project that did something like this, that provided connections in these corridors from East Riverside through the core into Highland. And so again, the next question was, let me close that here. The next question was, how do we get there? What is the actual project? And so we did an alternatives analysis, looked at different kinds of transit that we could use. We evaluated lots of different types of high-capacity transit, almost anything you can think of. We looked at different alternative routes, looked at where the stations might be. We used what kind of service we think we need in those corridors to help us screen some of those out. We looked at different ways of crossing the river, getting through downtown, looked at lots of different alternatives. Where we ended up is the recommended locally preferred alternative, and that is our first urban rail line here for Central Texas, and that would start at Grove and Highland there in East Riverside, connecting to our dense local bus network there with park and rides, crossing the river, connecting up to Trinity, connecting to the Red Line there at the Convention Center, stations at UT, St. David's, another park and ride at Hancock, and connection to the Red Line. And then ending near ACC Highland in Middle Fiskville, where we'd also locate a park and ride to start providing people with an alternative to that IH-35 congestion. And it sets us up very well as the first line in an eventual urban rail system serving Central Austin. And you can see here on the screen We've identified as part of the Project Connect visioning process and refining through this process potential future extensions that will be studied, again, towards the development of a future urban rail system that would tie into the regional high-capacity transit system as is envisioned by the Project Connect map you see before you. So it all needs to connect and it all needs to tie in together. So a little bit more about the locally preferred alternative. It is nearly 10 miles long, 9.5 miles of urban rail, which is a mode of transit that's kind of a hybrid between light rail and streetcar, although in our project it's operating more like a light rail type system. It would be double tracked so we could achieve high frequencies and electrified. It would have 16 stations with 4 park-and rides, 2 on each end of this initial line, which would allow people to park and get on this reliable transit service. We estimate very conservatively that there would be 18,000 daily riders on this line by 2030. And of those 18,000, 6,500 of them would be new transit riders just on this line. We also estimate an additional 3,500 new transit riders on the system. So a total of 10,000 new transit riders. And so the difference there, although we'd have 6,500 new transit riders on this one line, having this one line that, for instance, connects to Metro Rail makes Metro Rail more attractive to more people because you can get to more places on Metro Rail now that it connects up to this line. And so we think on the rest of the system it makes the buses more attractive, it makes Metro Rapid and Express more attractive, that we would get 3,500 new riders on the overall transit system as a result of this investment. So that equates to, again, conservatively, about 10,000 cars off our roads per day, or about 200,000 a month, again, conservatively. This would be very competitive with driving in the Central Corridor as far as time. From Grove to the Convention Center, which is about 4 miles, we'll be able to get there in about 11 minutes. ACC Highland to the Convention Center at 17 minutes, which is very competitive. Next time you're driving in downtown Austin at rush hour, in central Austin at rush hour, time yourself. You'll find that this is going to be very competitive with driving, and you don't have to worry about parking once you get to central Austin. It is a significant cost to construct this initial line at $1.38 billion estimated, and that's in 2020 dollars, and we'll break down the cost a little bit more here in just a second. And then annual operations and maintenance costs of about $22 million a year in 2022 dollars. What kind of service will this provide? When we asked the public what did they want to see out of this service, what was the #1 attribute they wanted to see, they told us, you need to show up when you tell me you're going to show up, and you need to get me there when you tell me you're going to get there. It needs to be reliable. In order to make this transit reliable, it needs to have, to the fullest extent possible, its own right-of-way. It cannot share its line with regular auto traffic. If it's stuck in the same traffic as everything else, it will not be reliable. So when we started to identify this project, we said it needs to be mostly dedicated. Maybe a few stretches it might share some of its right-of-way with auto traffic, but for the most part it needs to be dedicated to ensure that reliability. People also told us they didn't want to wait very long, especially on days like this as we start to get warmer. They don't want to wait 30 minutes in between these things, or else it's not going to be a real alternative for them. So we felt that frequency had to be about 10 to 15 minutes in the peak at rush hour. People need to be able to get to this thing very easily, and it needs to serve lots of the major destinations. So the stops need to be relatively close together, within a half mile to a mile in between stations. And speed, again, it has to be a real alternative. It has to be competitive with driving in the Central Corridor. So when we initially were identifying the project, we said it needs to be at least 20 to 30 miles per hour on average. So that includes stops and boarding and all of that, which again is very competitive with driving. And where we ended up with this project is actually, we think we have a project that will be almost completely, if not completely, fully dedicated right-of-way, so it will be very, very reliable. We think it will be very frequent, every 10 minutes at the peak hour, and then every 15, in the peak hour is rush hour, and then every 15 minutes off-peak or non-rush hour times, like the middle of the day or in the evening after rush hour or on the weekends or late night. Stop spacing, we actually ended up being a little closer together every half mile, so lots of people will be able to get to this line and it will serve lots of the destinations they want to get to. That did slow us down a little because we have more stops. We're now at the lower end of about 20 miles per hour on average, but again, that's very, very competitive with driving in Central Austin. So that's the service. Now, who is this line actually going to serve? Well, lots of us here in Central Texas. Within a half mile of these 16 stations here, we have today about 46,000 people residing there currently. And as a result of this investment, we believe that we'll have another 16,000 new residents, and these are conservative numbers again, there by 2030. Now, having a lot of people living along this line is very, very important, helps drive ridership. But what's even more important are jobs along this line. This really drives transit ridership. And today, we have nearly 100,000 employees currently within a half mile of this proposed transit line, within a half mile of these stations. And we believe by virtue of the investment in this line that it will attract over 20,000 new employees from other parts of the region. We'll start to focus employment around these stations by 2030. It is a significant cost to develop this initial line, but we believe for every dollar that the public sector invests in here, we'll get at least $3 in private development around these stations, which would result in $23 million of new annual City of Austin property and sales tax revenue, which can be used for all the other things that we need in our community, like parks, schools, sidewalks, etc. So there's a lot of significant benefits from this first line, but again, it's just the first line. Those costs are broken down a little bit more for you here. A couple of things to note. These are, I guess you call them like the worst case scenario. This is what we think the maximum that something like this would cost. We will be trying to spend significantly less than this in actually developing this project. But what we don't want to do is tell the public it's going to cost $1.4 billion and that not be enough and have to come back for more money later. That's absolutely not what we want to do. So what we want to do is make sure we're capturing all the possible costs, and then hopefully as we continue with design and implementation, it doesn't end up costing this much. In addition, of this $1.38 billion, we would expect, and the process we've been following the whole time, is to develop a project that will be very competitive for federal funding. And that we would expect that the federal government would pay for about half of this cost. So $700 million or so paid for by the federal government, and the other $700 million would be local dollars spent on this project. So what are the next steps? I'm wrapping this up here and then I'll get to your questions. Sorry, it's taken me a little bit longer than I thought to get through all of this. The next steps to making this recommended project a reality. Well, there's some key decision points that we're very close to having. We will be taking this recommendation by our project team to our advisory group this Friday afternoon, and you can watch that on Channel 6. It'll be at City Hall. This Friday, they will be taking action on this recommendation, and their recommendation will then advance to the Capital Metro Board of Directors and the Austin City Council at the dates you see there. And assuming that they take action on that and this moves forward, there's the potential in August for our City Council to take action on a transportation bond package that would include that local share that would be matched with those federal dollars to move this project forward. In addition, as this project moves forward and is approved, we would advance it into the next stage of planning, which we call NEPA. That's our environmental study that is required for us to receive those federal funds. And that will be a very public process as well, where everybody would have the opportunity to be involved in that environmental study. In addition, while that's going on, we, again, are not going to stop there. We need a system of urban rail to serve Austin that connects into the regional transit system. So we're going to continue with further urban rail system planning. And beyond that, we're going to continue to do the regional corridor studies, similar to what we did with Project Connect, to continue to identify projects at the regional level that will connect to this urban rail system to serve all of Central Texas. So if you recall, again, here's the conceptual urban rail system to serve Austin that highlights there the initial recommended line. So this will continue to study these other lines to develop the urban rail system that will connect to other projects that we're going to identify in these regional corridors here in Central Texas. So we're looking at the southwest corridor going to San Marcos, including Oak Hill, the northwest corridor, and the east corridor. We'll continue to identify projects there for this all to connect into, because again, at the end of the day, we want to develop this regional system to serve Central Texas, to provide people a real alternative to congestion and address those other regional challenges that we talked about. So next steps for you, we now want you to ask questions, make comments, let us know what you think, what you like, what you don't like, what other questions you need answered. Continue to be engaged in this process, sign up for email updates, get involved in our social media. If any of you are a member of a neighborhood or community or church group, or maybe your employer has groups that gets together, if you think there's a group of people that need to hear or have questions about this particular recommendation and the overall Project Connect system plan, let us know. We'd love to come to talk to you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the questions and see what you have to say. We've now been joined by Kyle. Go ahead and say hi, Kyle. Who will help us answer the questions. Let's see. We had a few questions about the webinar itself, which looks like it's been resolved. We had the question, how many attendees are on the phone? That was asked by Eric, and I believe we have 28 people on the webinar. They may not all be on the phone. Some of them are using their computer. Ted asks, let me get to Ted's question here. My apologies. Ted asked, why is it stopping at Grove? Let me get there, just one second. Yeah, we saw it for a second, and then I lost it. Just one moment. There it is. Oh. My apologies, having a little technical difficulties here. Here we go. So Ted asked, why does the proposed urban rail start and stop at Grove versus going all the way to the airport? It's a good question. I can throw it to one of you guys, but...
This is Kyle. The central corridor boundaries that we established, we're again looking at that central corridor. We have identified an eastern boundary of Springdale and Grove, southern boundary of Boltworth. And so we're somewhat constrained in our initial analysis by looking at within those limits of the central corridor. What we have heard through various conversations, is the interest in being able to serve the airport. So we certainly have positioned the project in such a way that we can easily extend to it. We're about 2 miles from Grove along Riverside to get to the airport property, and then approximately about another 2 miles to get to the terminal. In the airport planning, they've actually identified a slot that would allow us to be able to serve that terminal area. And so we're certainly positioned with a future extension to be able to serve the airport directly.
And all that, this is Scott, one of the things that we'll be doing with all of the underlying bus network is orienting that service to help serve and support this line. And very likely we'll have some kind of shuttle extension to the airport as part of that first phase project.
So Ted, I'd also highlight the, let me get here. So you can see the additional urban rail conceptual extensions. We have one that'd be going to further. It's hard to see here, but there's a line that goes down here. Okay. Let's see. Does any other questions? Let's see. Some of y'all may not have heard all of that, and we will. Kyle, do you want to, let's see, let me check the audio here. You want to maybe try again, maybe just summarize what you had just mentioned one more time? I believe.
Okay, we'll try this one more time. The question was, why aren't we stopping at Grove? The Study area that we identified initially for the central corridor had an eastern boundary of Springdale and Grove and a southern boundary of Oltorf. So that did constrain some of our initial analysis looking at the area. So we did not include the boundaries going all the way to the airport initially. What I had explained is that we are certainly positioned in such a way to extend this investment in a future project. We're about 2 miles from the airport property itself if we were to continue on Grove down Riverside, and then another 2 miles to go within the property and get to the terminal. What I had also indicated is that the airport in its planning process had contemplated urban rail or rail of some sort serving the terminal building, and they have actually designed a slot for us to be able to fit into. So even though we're not serving this directly with the first investment, we're certainly able to extend the project with a future investment to directly serve the airport. There are a number of experiences that other cities have undertaken to serve airports. Typically, you don't do that on your first investment. It's usually a secondary investment. And certainly places like Denver, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Phoenix, those cities have in fact extended to the airport on subsequent investments.
So let me get to the next question. Hopefully that answers yours, Ted. We've got a question. Why is it necessary to build another bridge over the lake when we have the Waterloo project tunnelers finishing up? Why not go under the lake instead? It's a no-brainer. Well, we actually did look at that as part of phase 2 of our study, looking at, how do we get there? That was a big question, and how do we get there? And we did look at actually tunneling under the lake. On the bottom of the lake, we looked at some sort of tunnel that would sit on top of the bottom of the lake. We looked at a short tunnel going through downtown and emerging there on 4th Street, and then a long tunnel going all the way to 15th Street under downtown. And there are, as you allude, lots of great benefits to doing that, certainly with reliability and speed. Unfortunately, though, in our analysis, we ruled those out because the additional cost of going underground versus on the street was not worth the actual increased ridership and other benefits, and would make the project comparatively less attractive or competitive for federal funding. So, there would be some benefits to going underground, but just not enough to justify the additional expense. So it is something we looked at, and if you want additional information on that, we have that information on the Project Connect website as part of some of the presentations that we did to our advisory group on that very issue.
I would address, just to give you a little bit more information, the long tunnel option. We looked at this segment from Riverside all the way up to 17th, and we compared an at-grade solution with a bridge with a below-grade tunnel, as John Michael indicated. The ridership would essentially be the same because we have the same number of stations downtown, but the cost to go underground was $300 million more. And so that added a substantial amount of cost to the project, but did not help us become more cost-effective in terms of the additional ridership that we would have. So I did want to make sure we addressed that. But the first part of the question was, why is it necessary to build another bridge over the lake? We also examined the idea of converting an existing bridge, such as Congress and First or the I-35 frontage lanes. In order to do that, we would have taken lanes of traffic away from that, from those bridges, which we found were also unacceptable. So I did want to make sure that you understood that we looked at both of these. Tunnel costs are more than just tunneling. There's fire life safety provision. There's ventilation that needs to be required, other emergency access and other things. So the cost of this is much greater than just the tunneling, the boring cost itself.
Yeah. So what other questions do you have? What are your comments? Ask you, what do you think about this proposed project? What are your concerns about it? So if you have any, please do type them into the question box there, and we will try to answer them as best we can. Anything else y'all want to add while we're getting some additional questions in about the next steps for the project?
I would, one of the questions that has come up regarding the last question about tunneling, there has been a continued interest on the part of the advisory group to continue to examine the short tunnel option, which was about $40 million more than the bridge option. We've indicated that we could consider that option as we move into the environmental impact process and the preliminary engineering efforts. We felt that relatively low cost certainly provided us with something to examine. The longer tunnel option we felt was just unreachable for us.
Okay, well, good. We've got some additional questions that we've just received. Eric asked, it looks like it's a money question, how will the new rail line be funded from the city? If property taxes are part of the source, then what is Project Connect's plan and communications to address Austin residents who do not want their property tax raised to fund this new rail line? Well, that is an interesting question. You know, there's a lot of discussion and feelings out there about people's most recent property tax bills. It's a tough environment, but you know, we think that this is a good project, and actually, you know, I'm sure that's something that our advisory group and actually really the city council are going to be wrestling with as they move to an August timeframe.
Now, I would add to that, currently there is no dedicated funding source for this project. And so we do not have the ability to use those existing sources of funding from either the city or Capital Metro. So we have developed a funding approach that is built on two important aspects. Number one is, can we be able to develop a project that can be attractive to federal investors, if you will. FTA would invest half of the project, as John Michael talked about earlier, in this project. So do we have a project that can be competitive in that arena? That would fund 50% of the project. The other 50% would be what we call the local match. That local match right now is in fact envisioned, as the questioner suggests, that it is envisioned that there would be a general obligation bond potentially placed on the ballot for this November that the City Council will be considering. And so the idea is that this fund, about $700 million of this total $1.38 million project, is what would be requested from local property owners to be able to help support. So that is the approach moving forward, and certainly we'll have lots of conversation. The City Council is anticipated to take action the end of this month on the 26th, at which point in time they will consider that very action. They have until the first part of August to actually set ballot language if they want to go forward with that. So there will be a number of conversations between now and August before such an action is taken.
Let's see. Why? I think Hayden asked, and I think we might have addressed this. Why can't you repurpose the existing Congress or First Street bridges? Do you think we feel like we've addressed that one already, maybe?
Yeah, this is Scott. Hi, Hayden. We've had this conversation a couple of times already. So both of the existing bridges can be rehabilitated to accommodate the loading required for urban rail. However, we saw a couple of major impediments to doing so, and that really revolves around the impact to traffic and capacity of those bridges. If we are to stick with dedicated lanes for urban rail, then we'd be taking 2 lanes away from either of those bridges, either of those 6-lane bridges, which can scarcely afford that that capacity. In addition, were we to widen to accommodate them, that doesn't really do us any good because, while that would add theoretically capacity to the bridges, they're still constrained by the intersections upstream and downstream, so it really wouldn't benefit anything. The alternative would be to run in mixed traffic, but that would have a severe impact on reliability of this service. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear from the community early on when we started scoping the project in January was that reliability was the most important service characteristic.
We had a question, is this route locked in already? We still have environmental and design to do, so I guess no.
Yeah, essentially we're waiting on the action of the advisory group and the council and Capital Metro Board of Directors to, in essence, consider this as the preferred alignment. As we move into the preliminary engineering and environmental process, we'll continue to advance the project design. We'll look at potential impacts. We'll identify potential mitigation measures. And during that process, we may consider what are called design options. I call those tweaks in the alignment that would be necessary to respond to impact issues that we identify. The general alignment, though, is a recommendation that we have informed through your input and many others throughout the community during our Phase 1 evaluation of subcorridors, and then certainly the definition of the project alignment and station locations would be examined in more detail.
Okay. So Robin asks a question, what will be the impact on traffic during the rail construction? Oh, that's an interesting one. Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that. Traffic impact is going to be a big part of our environmental process. We'll look at this from not only what happens during construction, but what would be the impact on traffic once this is implemented. And so I can tell you that one of the key things that we will be examining in the next couple of years as we go through this process is identifying all of those traffic issues and developing appropriate mitigation measures to address it. Your question about construction is an important one. Any kind of roadway construction is going to have some traffic management requirements. The realignment of Red River right now, for example, is a challenge that's being addressed over the summer months. It still has impact, but maybe it's not as significant as during school session. So that timing of that project may have considered some of the impact there. A traffic management plan is something that we will be examining and developing as a part of the final design efforts to be able to try to make sure that we maintain access to adjacent properties as well as to allow traffic to flow. So we are certainly aware that that's a critical issue that's on the minds of many as we move into any construction project.
Okay. Kevin asks, do commuters from the Northern Corridor currently park at Highland and use the existing Highland Mall Red Line for the last mile commute? What is the strategy behind building a second park and ride at the same location? I think the answer to that question is no. There is not currently parking for, at least not legal, for the Red Line at the Highland Station. But the other thing is the actual location of where the Highland Station is. If you're driving on IH-35, you actually have to get off I-35, come down 290 a little bit, and then come up Airport Boulevard quite a bit to even get to the Highland Station. So for many, imagine coming down from IH-35, that's not a real alternative for them. The proposed First Urban Rail Line would have its park and ride much closer on the other side of the Highland redevelopment, closer to Middle Fiskville. So right next to IH-35, which will be a much easier and more direct opportunity for people in that corridor to pull off, park, and then get on a reliable urban rail line into Central Austin or any of the things between there and Central Austin. So I think the answer to your question is if there's some of that activity happening, it's very limited, but it's because of, I think, the location and the lack of parking there. This urban rail line would be quite a bit different. The other challenge with Metro Rail is that it doesn't run very frequently. In addition, its hours are somewhat limited. And so it's not really, it's a different kind of service serving a different market and a different travel need. So this would be a different service in a very close proximity to that other service, but not duplicative. It would do different things. And we're very confident that having that park and ride there at Middle Fiskville would provide a real alternative to IH-35 commuters. Okay, Eric says, thanks for the response from an earlier question. He knows we're early in the process right now. Let's see. Eric goes on to say, or excuse me, another question, the next question. I have to say making a tollway rather than HOV lanes on MOPAC may have left a bad taste in many voters' mouths, may affect the vote on this. That's, I'm sure, a valid concern or thought on that. I don't know if that really is impactful beyond the vote issue on our project. Certainly, with regard to the larger Project Connect system, we are anxious, whether it's an HOV lane or a tollway, what we're interested in is reliable travel times that are competitive with driving, or actually beat driving in many instances, for transit. So if it's an HOV lane and we could assure reliable travel times for transit on it, that's great. But the decision was made on MOPAC for those express lanes. Now there are other corridors that are where there are similar lanes under consideration, like South MOPAC and IH-35, and so I certainly encourage you to participate in those processes, which also have pretty robust public involvement opportunities for you to make that your opinions known. Let's see, Josh. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I wanted to add on that, just to be clear, so the toll lanes, the managed lanes on MOPAC are going to serve high-capacity transit as well. So there is an HOV-like or people-moving capacity benefit that will come with those toll lanes.
Okay. So Josh asks, is that bond to be paid by Austin residents only or the entire Capital Metro area? If you are specifically targeting an IH-35 orientation in order to relieve commuter traffic from non-Austin residents, i.e. Round Rock, Georgetown, etc., why are Austinites footing the whole local match? Well, this wouldn't be exclusive to people from outside of Austin. There's a lot of Austinites who live north of 290 there on IH-35. The city limits go all the way up to, well, where Pflugerville starts, over there in the Wells Branch area. Actually, I think Wells Branch those are Austin taxpayers. So most of Austin is actually, the north part of Austin is north of there. Certainly, there will likely be some opportunity for folks outside of the Capital Metro service area to also use this service. But remember, this is not the only thing we're doing. We also have the North Corridor plan, which will actually be more than likely a better alternative for those commuters, because we will be serving them directly through that plan with transit that goes right to their community to Central Austin. And for those projects, those communities will have to participate financially and pay their fair share. So certainly, your concern is valid, but I think it's not going to be a significant issue where Austin is footing the bill for the entire region's commuter needs. We do have the other regional projects which will be addressing those needs, in which those other municipalities and counties will be participating, or they won't happen. So let's see. How is the transit plan, Betty asks, integrated into the Great Streets and Complete Streets plan? Well, in the downtown area, very much so, because all of these transit trips will require at some point some sort of pedestrian connection. So having a great pedestrian and cycling infrastructure is important to make these things successful. I don't know, maybe you can comment on specifically what may have been done.
Yeah, I'll add that, especially with regards to Trinity, the street section that we are, the kind of future street section that we're basing our typical or our conceptual typical section on is a Great Street section. So that's 18-foot sidewalks on either side and 44 feet from curb to curb. Now, that doesn't mean that we will stick to that directly. There may be some accommodations because that presumes 4 11-foot lanes. We need a little bit more space for urban rail, but same basic section and very much compatible with the Complete Streets policy. Whether every single road will have all modes represented on it remains to be seen. I mean, it's important that we approach these practically, and I believe Complete Streets kind of accommodates the fact that we have a very healthy grid through downtown, so not every street necessarily has to carry every mode. but we are committed to doing our best to provide for all modes on every one of our streets on the alignment.
So the next question is asked by Eleanor. She asks, I've been told that Lamar has been ruled out for rail in the future. Why is that the case? Hopefully nobody told you that, because that is not the case. Actually, if you look at the Project Connect, both the vision and these conceptual, the conceptual urban rail system, it does envision having urban rail along the Lamar corridor. And actually, when we were looking at those subcorridors within the central corridor and identifying our priority areas, after East Riverside and Highland, the Mueller subcorridor, the Lamar subcorridor, and the East Austin subcorridor were the next tier of priorities. So the Lamar corridor has not been ruled out for urban rail. And actually, it's one of the likely candidates to be studied for the next investment in urban rail. Again, we're trying to develop a system because this one urban rail line, which we think is valuable on its own, is not really going to make a meaningful impact unless it's part of a bigger system. So, or it's not going to be able to make its full impact unless it's part of a bigger system. It will make a meaningful impact on its own. But we are going to continue to study additional urban rail lines to make the system happen, and additional other regional transit lines, because it all needs to work together. Hayden asks, does this rail line up Red River preclude urban rail on the Guadalupe-Lamar corridor? And I think just address that. No, it doesn't. Hayden goes on to say, would you say this urban rail plan favors speculative developments or existing transit demand? I'll take a shot at that. I don't think it favors speculative development. I think it favors development that's already in place and that is underway right now. This would serve development that is underway and more to come on the East Riverside corridor. Development that is underway and more to come through downtown. For example, the medical school is not a figment of our imagination or hopeful. I mean, it's already broken ground. And UT has plans for additional phases of development. The UT certainly has plans for additional development on its campus that would be served by this first line. And usually, if UT wants to get something done, they're pretty good about getting things done on their campus. In addition, we have ACC Highland at the other end of the line. They will be opening up the first phase of that redevelopment within the next 2 months with several thousand students. And we also have other development that's happening along airport. So there's a lot of things already on that corridor. There's a lot of things under construction. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Central Austin will continue to develop. We're in a pretty incredible environment for that. With regard to existing transit demand, absolutely, we are serving existing transit demand. Actually, if you look at all those different sub-corridors within the Central Corridor, if I'm not mistaken, the Riverside Corridor had the highest existing transit ridership. The next highest, if I'm not mistaken, was Lamar, but followed pretty closely by Highland. We have a lot of existing transit service on Riverside Boulevard itself, but then also connecting to Riverside Boulevard from the Dove Springs and Southeast Austin area, from the East Austin area down Pleasant Valley, from Old Torf. So there's a tremendous amount of existing, actually the highest of all those Central Austin areas along East Riverside. And then the Highland Corridor, we have a tremendous amount of existing transit ridership there. Going up Red River, you have the 10. You have the 7 that heads up in the Duval area. You have the Red River Shuttle for UT. You have the 37, which also traverses a lot of that corridor. You have lots of existing transit ridership. One of the biggest boarding areas in the entire local bus service is the Highland Transfer Center right there at Highland Mall in Justin. So to answer your question, we think this urban rail plan favors existing and future developments that we are confident are happening and existing transit demand. It's kind of the best of both worlds there. Hayden says, I should let you know this is not Hayden. I was just invited to the webinar via her GoToMeeting link. Okay, Hayden, well, we won't blame you for all those questions. It was somebody else. We see Hayden a lot, so we know she's had a lot of these questions answered before. So it's past our posted time at 1 o'clock. If you have additional questions, we would encourage you to send them in to info@projectconnect.com. Let me ask you just real quick before we get off. I have a couple other questions I'd like to ask you, if you have just another moment. Let's see. We want to ask you just real quick if you agree with this statement. Do you believe that this recommended first urban rail line, would it provide a real alternative to congestion, in your opinion, along some of our busiest travel corridors in the region? So take a moment to answer that question, whether you agree with that. So I have one more question after this. Just so you know, upcoming opportunities, we have open houses all throughout the city. We've already started that last week. We've got more. Please go to projectconnect.com to look at when we'd have an open house in your area, or we're going to be at lots of community events, farmers markets, etc. Over the next few weeks. So we'd really like you to join us and maybe have even more questions answered. When we're there, we have a little bit more time to answer more detailed questions. 80% of you have voted so far, so just take one more second. If you haven't had a second or if you haven't had a chance to vote, let me close it now. So it looks like a healthy majority of you agree that this recommended first line of urban rail would provide an alternative to congestion on some of our busiest corridors. So let me see, I think we have time for one last question. Again, keeping in mind that we want to develop a system here, and these projects that we're talking about, whether they're in the North Corridor or the Central Corridor, are just the next step in realizing the system. We have a question here for you. Do you believe that this recommended first urban rail line is a good next step towards the eventual completion of that regional vision for Project Connect, serving all of Central Austin and Central Texas? So do you think this is a good next step? So we're curious what you think about that. Again, we really thank you for your participation today. We'll give you another minute to answer this question. Again, in addition to the open houses we have coming up, you can participate in all of our meetings that are coming up, whether it's a city council meeting or the Capital Metro Board meeting or advisory group meeting, so you can sign up for citizens communication. And again, always, you can email us at info@projectconnect.com anytime to get a question answered. Eric asks, let me answer his question while others are still voting. Is this being recorded and a link to be provided for others who were not able to attend? I should have said that at the beginning. Absolutely, this is being recorded, and we will post it just as soon as we possibly can. So it's been a minute. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like we have another healthy majority of you do agree that this recommended first urban rail line is a good next step towards an urban rail system that serves Austin, and then of course a regional vision for high capacity transit here in Central Texas. We agree. We think it is a good next step. We're real pleased with this process and what came out of it, and we're excited to keep moving and continue to plan good projects to serve our community. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar and get the recording posted just as soon as I can. Oh, I didn't share the results. Thank you, Jace, for advising me of that. So there you go. Forgot to push that button. So in any case, thank you again for participating, and we'll get this online. And again, there will be other opportunities for you to participate. I think you guys can be the first to hear it. We are going to be having another opportunity tomorrow afternoon. We'll have an Ask Me Anything with Kyle on Reddit tomorrow afternoon, I think at 3 o'clock. So be looking for that so we can engage